Hey folks, I'm Chris Thornton, and if you've ever damaged the plug on an appliance like this lamp here, it can be a real problem. With a damaged plug, it's not safe to use, but it's quick and easy to replace it with a fresh plug. Let me show you how. To replace the plug or put a brand new plug on a piece of mains cable like this, in addition to the plug and the piece of mains cable that you're going to need, you're also going to need a few very basic tools. You're going to need some sort of screwdriver. This one here came out of this pack which also has a hammer and some pliers and a selection of different heads for the screwdriver and a spanner here. I just got that from IKEA, had that for ages. It's a useful sort of multi-purpose basic toolkit. So that's where my screwdrivers come from. You're also going to need some kind of wire strippers as well. You could do this with a penknife if the penknife is reasonably sharp, and I'll show you how to do that as I'm going through this whole tutorial, but wire strippers are going to be easier. These are about as cheap as they come. You can probably pick them up for a couple of quid or so in places like B&Q. So not really any particularly specialised equipment. Now, here is your piece of mains cable. What we're going to need to do is strip the end off this to have a look at it for a start. If you're using wire strippers like this, you may be using much more sophisticated ones, but basically all you're going to want to do is take a little bit of this outer cable off. This is a little bit fiddly because these wire strippers aren't really made for the task. This is the point where I'd probably go, wait a minute, I'm just going to use my penknife. So let's just roll around here, and all I'm trying to do is remove this outer white layer. I'm just trying to cut gently through it. You don't need to apply an awful lot of pressure. Just roll that cable until you've cut through it a reasonable way. Now as you pull that apart, you should hopefully see it start to flex a little bit. I've not got through yet, so let me keep going with that. The key thing that you don't want to happen here is you don't want to go right the way through. You just want to cut the outer. Now you see just there, I am starting just about to break through. Look out for that. You can see the inner wire just there. I don't want to break through that inner wire. I just want to break through the outer bit here. So be gentle with it. Better to go slowly and get it right first time than rush at it and make a mistake. There we go, getting there. And you may want to work on this a little bit, pull it apart a little bit, and you'll see where it is that you need to cut it a little more. So I just need to chop it a bit more there. And round here needs a little more work. Nearly there. Now, it doesn't always want to come off particularly easily, but if you work at it a little bit, you should be able to pull it loose. Nearly done there. There we go. Now normally, the cable inside here has a little bit of talc applied to it just to make this outer layer slide off, but it can still be a little bit of a struggle. But there we go. That's the outer part of the cable, which is completely off now. You don't need that anymore. We're interested in these three inner wires here, and they are actually coloured. Now it varies from country to country. It goes without saying that what I'm doing here is talking about what the situation is in the UK. In the UK, let me just hold that a little closer so you can see it a bit more clearly. In the UK, we've got three different colours. We've got a brown, we've got in the middle there, we've got a sort of stripy yellow and green, and we've got a blue wire. Those are your three key colours of cables. They all do different things. The brown is the live, the blue is the neutral, the green is the earth. Now if you're dealing with a low powered device or something which doesn't have any metal parts which are accessible by the user, then it might not have this green and yellow cable, the earth cable. So something like a hairdresser where the case of it is all plastic, or perhaps a lamp, might not have that, in which case you don't need to worry about it. When I talk about doing that part, you can completely ignore that bit. It'll just have the live and neutral wires. That's the brown and the blue. And I'll talk about where those connect up in a second. Let's have a look. Now we've got the end of that stripped off, let's have a look inside our plug. So here's my replacement plug. To get it open, this screw in the center, that screw there is the one which you need to undo. Don't worry about these two for the moment. If you saw my previous video on how to unscrew things, remember lefty-loosey to loosen that screw. Okay. Now, one of the pins has already fallen out there. If it does, just pop it back in. Shouldn't be a problem. Oh, had it the wrong way around there, wouldn't go back in. There we go. That's slotted back in properly. Now this is pretty much what the inside of your plug should look like in the UK. Let me just point out a few key features. This part here is called the cable grip, and that needs to grip the outer part of the cable. So that is going to be gripping on to this section of the cable, not these wires. If you can see these wires outside of the plug, that plug has not been fitted correctly. You should only be able to see this outer part of the cable. We've also got some connections to some of the pins. So we've got one here at the bottom left. This one here actually connects via the fuse to the bottom right. If you ever need to replace a fuse, it's just that one. Make sure you always replace the fuse with the same type of fuse. In the UK there are 3 amp, 5 amp and 13 amp fuses, which are the most common ones. You can just about see on this one, let me hold that a little bit closer, you can just about see that this is a 3 amp fuse. It would be extremely dangerous to replace a 3 amp fuse with a 13 amp fuse, because if there was a fault, the fuse wouldn't actually melt and it wouldn't cut off the electricity supply. So always replace a fuse with exactly the same type. So we've got one pin here, one pin just here, and another pin up at the top here, and we've got our cable grip. First thing that I want you to do is take your screwdriver and again, lefty-loosey, what you're going to do is just loosen these two screws here. If you keep your hand underneath the plug while you're doing this, then all the bits shouldn't fall out. Now you are not trying to completely untie this. All you want to do is get this a bit looser, because you are going to have to thread your cable through there, which is what I'm going to do in just a sec. So we'll leave that just for a moment and let's have a look at these different pins. Now your cables need to be connected to the right pin. Each wire needs to go to the correct one. And the way to remember it is down to the color coding. BR for the brown cable is going to BR the bottom right pin. BR for brown, BR for bottom right. So that's going to be connecting to this one. BL for blue is going to go to the bottom left pin. So that's the thing to remember. BR brown, bottom right pin. BL blue, bottom left pin. Finally, your earth cable, if it's present, goes to this top one. Doesn't always need to go there if there isn't actually any reason to connect it there. If you're replacing a wire, you're going to know straight away whether or not it needs to go to that earth pin, because either the earth cable will be there or it won't be there. If it's not there, don't worry about it. If it is there, just goes up to the top. But the key thing to remember, the one to get the correct way round, BL blue bottom left, BR brown bottom right. Now if we put this over there, you'll see that I'm going to need to be able to reach all the way up to the earth pin with this earth cable, and I'm going to need to make sure that my outer part of the cable is going to be held by the cable grip. So your outer part of the cable should be under there, and my earth cable is going to need to go around here and into there. I'm going to need to strip a little bit off the end so it'll make a contact, but it looks like my earth cable, if I have it about that far in, my earth cable ought to be long enough to do that. It ought to be able to curl round and go in like that. Oh, let me just bend that round so you can see. Okay. I ought to have enough length to get it round and in there. Should be fine. This cable here is going to be way too long, and this one is going to be way too long. So my next step is to trim a little bit off those. I'm going to make them shorter. And I'm also going to strip the ends of these. You've got to make an electrical contact, so you need to have some bare electrical wire on the end. So with my cable strippers, if you've got this type, just press and grip loosely and strip a little bit off. There we go. And you should see some bare copper wires at the end. Now it's going to make things a lot easier on you for the next step if you now twist them a little bit. If you don't twist them together like that, then they will tend to separate out and it becomes a lot more fiddly to get them to go in the hole. If you just twist them around a little bit, doesn't matter which way, whether you go that way or that way, but if you just twist them, they all tend to stay together. This cable and this cable, as we saw, are too long. So I'm going to chop half of that off, roughly. Don't worry about being exact. With a little bit of practice, you ought to get this right. And again, I'm going to strip the end of this off and twist it around. And the same one just here. Chop it about halfway down. Strip the end off. And you're only looking to strip maybe 3 or 4 millimeters off the end here. In fact, 4 is probably too long. This one, where I've just stripped it, if anything, that might be a little bit too long. But we'll see how we go. There we go. So, these are my 3 wires. Still got my live, which is going to go to bottom right, earth, which is going to go to the top, and blue, that's the neutral, which is going to go to bottom left. Now on your pins, you'll notice that there's a screw on top, and there's a little hole there. What you're going to do is get your wire to go through that hole, and then you're going to tighten the screw up to hold that in place. You may want at this point to just flatten them out a little bit. Now you've twisted them together, just run your fingernail across them, flatten out that surface a little bit, it'll make an even better contact. This is where it gets a tiny bit fiddly, because you need to push that up like that and thread all of these leads. I'll just push them together so I can do that. They all need to go underneath the cable grip, and the white bit needs to go under as well. If that white bit there isn't under the cable grip, isn't being held in place by the cable grip, then you've got a serious problem. It's not going to work properly. Getting the earth pin in first, that's normally how I like to do it, and you are going to have to manipulate these a little bit, but not too much. They are wires, they are flexible. There we go. Now once you've got one in, the others become fairly easy, and putting the earth one in first, I normally like to do that because you know that's the one that's furthest away. It's going to have to reach the furthest. Now I tighten that up. Oh, there we go. Make sure when you put that earth pin in that it's going round any obstructions in the middle here, not going over the top. If it goes over the top, you're not going to be able to close this plug up again. But that should be in there quite securely now. If you just pull on it gently, it shouldn't be willing to come out too easily. Next, we need to remember which way round our 2 cables go. So remember, brown BR is going to bottom right, so just there. And blue BL is going to bottom left. I'm going to do the blue one first. Again, you just need to bend that round. It's a little bit fiddly. Ooh, my screw isn't all the way out here. Again, just turning it a little bit further there gives me a little bit more to work with. And then you push that in. Ah, it's starting to fray already here, you see. This is why twisting it together is a good idea, because it reduces the chances of that, but it will still happen a little bit. If it does, just take it out, retwist it. Still not quite in there. As I say, this is a bit fiddly. Okay, now I'm going to go in the hole. I'm just going to poke it in a little bit deeper with my screwdriver. There we go. Nearly in. Try not to have any loose bits of wire sticking out. The more you can get in the hole, the better. I might have made my wire a little bit short here. I could perhaps have given myself a little bit more to work with. If you do, then you could always recut it. I'm just going to hold that in place as I tighten that up, finger tight. I think it's just about long enough, and then tighten it up with the screwdriver go. That is now held in. Okay, that's now making a contact and it's held in place. I could have maybe done with a little bit less exposed wire there. But so long as that isn't reaching out and touching any other parts, it shouldn't be a problem. It's not my best work, but it'll do. Okay, let me just show you that a little bit more clearly so you can see. So I've got a little bit more exposed wire just at the top there than I'd really like, but it's not too bad. I've done worse, and it's not touching any other parts, and it is in there securely. I just stripped a little bit more off the end of this blue wire than I really should have done. Last one to fit in is the brown wire just here, and it just needs to go under this one. Again, I'm going to loosen the screw, give myself the maximum amount of room to get it in there. Once you've got two of them in, getting this last one in is really tricky. But what you can do, what I'm going to do, if it's not going in particularly easily, you can pop this bit out. The bit with the fuse on will pop out, and you can even move the fuse out of the way, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And then you can just slip it over the end there. I'm going to tighten that up with my fingers. Okay, so this bit that the fuse was attached to, I popped it out of place just for a moment. I've tightened that up with my fingers. I'm going to tighten it up with a screwdriver now. Okay, that's nice and tight, and it's nice and secure on there. And then I can just pop that back in place, and the fuse can then just pop back on there. So there we go. It's perhaps not the neatest, tidiest job that I could have done. Still a little bit concerned about that blue one there, but not too bad. I don't have any bare wires touching any other bare wires. My outer cable is going right under the cable grip. That's a really big one, okay? Make sure that you get the outer cable here under the cable grip. That should be your first thing that you do. Brown BR bottom right goes up here. Blue BL bottom left goes down there. Once all of these are in there, make sure you take your screwdriver, get them really nice and tight, and you have now wired your plug. So long as you've got brown to bottom right, blue to bottom left, that's wired up. All you need to do now is put the whole thing back together. So turn it over and tighten the bottom two screws up. Tighten the right one a bit and then the left one a bit, and then go back to the right one and tighten that a bit. Because what you're doing here is tightening the cable grip. This takes the stress off the blue and brown and yellow and green wires. So that if someone were to trip over the lead for this or pull on it during an accident, it's now going to be pulling against this outer cable, which is held in place by the cable grip. I'm going to screw that side in a little bit more because it's not quite even yet. Remember, when you're tightening a screw up, righty-tighty. So lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. So now my cable grip is gripping the outer part of the cable really securely. All my wires are in place, my fuse is in place. I can do the final step, which is to put this on. Make sure, as a final check, you don't have any wires going over the top of any of these middle plastic bits. Your fuse and everything else shouldn't be blocking you putting that back together. It should fit neatly back together with no gaps. And finally then, this screw, you can just tighten it up, righty-tighty. And there you go. And that's all there is to replacing a plug socket here in the UK. The key thing to remember, BL for the blue wire goes to BL for the bottom left pin. BR for the brown wire goes to BR for the bottom right pin. If you get that right, then you shouldn't have any trouble. If this video was useful to you, please leave a comment or a like, or click one of my other videos just here, or click here to subscribe. Thanks very much for watching.